I want to talk about the Bethesda review. I don't have it listed, but you've read it. I've read it. You watched 2 videos. I watched 2 videos, both on differing ideas.
Somewhat different perspectives.
The main thesis, I think.
Yeah.
So there's 2 videos we watched. One, the Cynical Brit did a video, and although he rambled on about a whole bunch of stuff that I don't think mattered, his original, I think his top thought was, this review policy is bad for the consumers. Now let me say what the review policy is, because I haven't talked about that yet. Essentially, Bethesda says they will no longer issue review copies of their games to reviewing sites like Kotaku, IGN, GameSpot, GameStop, things like that, any more than a day before it's released. Right. So if Dishonored 2 comes out November 12th, nobody's getting a game before that before November 11th. You're dropping your water all over the place.
Sorry, dude. Yeah.
Instead, where most game companies give people review copies
like a couple weeks in
advance. Weeks in advance. Sometimes months,
right?
If you can. So this is a big thing. The reasonings that they cite in this article, which can be found on Bethesda, their website, is that Doom was not given to anybody more than a day in advance, and that came out at very good reviews. People said it was one of the best shooters of the year.
Right.
Maybe one of the best shooters of recent years. It was fantastic. And Bethesda essentially said, look, we didn't give anybody any early access to that, and look how good it is. Normally, when people don't give early access, it means that their game is bad, and they don't want those reviews to come out saying the game is bad, so that way they can make more money. Right. But with this one, they're citing that Doom did well. And I also have other things comparing it to. I have a lot of things to compare it to.
Right. On
the other side of the video we watched the Kinda Funny Games Cast segment about where they talk about Bethesda's review.
Yep.
Colin Moriarty, who is the prominent person behind that. I actually like listening to P.S. I Love You, XOXO, and the Games Cast. I really like Colin Moriarty's ideas on things. All 4 of those guys have been in the industry for so long. All of them have worked at IGN, I believe, and then they kind of split off to do their own thing.
Yeah, they made some mention of that in the video.
So I think they're definitely experts in their field, and the way to talk about things is great. Essentially, Colin Moriarty says that this does not affect the consumers at all. It shouldn't affect them at all. It shouldn't affect their bottom line or anything. The only people this affects is the review sites, the IGNs, the GameSpots, the GameStops, the Game Radars, the Kotakus.
Right.
So 2 differing opinions
for
consumer base, which is what you and I are. And our listeners, preferably, I would think.
I think so. I mean, there might be a few people who just like to listen to our
sultry voices.
Our beautiful voices.
I don't blame them.
Oh, baby girl.
Oh, baby boy.
So, anyways.
So what are your initial thoughts on the Bethesda review? 2
things that I initially think of
when you read it or when you listened to the videos.
When I listened to the videos,
the Cynical Brit video is 21 minutes long,
right?
And the game one is 35 minutes long. But they also talk about other things.
They do. They get. I felt like they were more off topic than the Critical Brit was.
The Cynical Brit.
What did I say?
The Critical.
Oh, well.
The Cynical Brit is a big YouTuber. He has been for a while. He does a lot of game reviews and things.
Yeah. Here are my thoughts. Number 1, if you have confidence in your product, it does not make sense, or why wouldn't it make sense, to release your games early so you can ramp up the hype, right? Like if you have full confidence your game is awesome, and you release it 2 weeks early to get some reviews out there, to get some buzz going, doesn't that help you? So this seems to be, to me, I agree with the cynical Brit's viewpoint. He makes this statement. It seems to me that it's sad, or it's like they're lacking confidence in their own stuff, that they would not give it out early, because that doesn't show a sign of strength. It shows almost like fear of what media can do to their game. Point number 2.
Can I respond to that point before you make a second one?
Can I make the second one first? Just so I don't forget it.
I'm going to forget. Fine.
Okay. The second thing I wanted to talk about was you said, and in the video with Colin Moriarty.
Yeah.
Was it Colin?
The Gamescast.
Yeah, Gamescast guys.
Kind of funny guys.
Said it doesn't affect the consumers. It only affects game sites. Well, I think it more directly affects game sites and news sites, but I still think this does affect the consumer, Because while they rant about pre-orders, I do think there are consumers out there who don't pre-order games and who do wait for reviews. And so I think that it does affect the consumer because they're getting information later as opposed to before. Also, some people pre-order games, and while they pre-order them, they look up reviews and they look up gameplay, like early gameplay, just to confirm what they did, or else they'll switch their pre-order to something else that they're more excited for if there isn't critical success or if there isn't like enough hype about the game itself. Now, I think the consumer is kind of dumb sometimes. Sometimes I don't think we do that. I don't think that we wait for all the information. I think sometimes we jump the gun. Case in point, me, Final Fantasy 15 pre-ordered. I probably shouldn't have done that. But
I have that on my list. I want to show you real quick. Anyways, it's on here somewhere.
Do you have what was your point that you were going to bring up?
Your first point.
Okay.
First of all, to get to my Final Fantasy joke.
Okay.
I have a list of games that came out this year in recent years, all their ratings. We're going to compare that to Bethesda games. And on Final Fantasy 15's, it says 2016 question mark?
Hey, it's supposed to come out at the end of this month. Come on.
Anyway, so your first point was... I have a brain fart.
First point was that this shows that Bethesda is not confident in their games.
It's not confident. I think it shows the opposite. I think it could show, just like it could show that.
Yeah.
It could show yours. I think in mine it shows we're so confident in our games, we don't need other people to tell you how good they are. You're gonna purchase this game and you're gonna enjoy it based on the fact that you have Bethesda. Trust in the developer. You have trust in what we've done in the past. We don't need people to speak on our behalf because we speak on our own behalf and we're doing great things.
Yeah, I think that could be a valid point too. I think they do have a lot of consumer loyalty, right? Like some of the biggest game companies that we know of, like that I think are good, Bethesda's always right up there.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a lot of trust there. I don't know. I mean, I don't have like a complete history of Bethesda's games and how good they've been, but it seems in recent years they've been very good.
I do.
Dun dun dun.
Also, to go along with that, specifically, a recent game, No Man's Sky, was released early for review.
Yep.
And then there was a day one patch that almost completely changed the game.
Yeah.
So what's the point of having the game before that day one patch? You can't review anything if it's going to be completely changed anyway.
How often is it the case that the first patch completely changes the game? I don't think that's very often. I think usually it's like bug glitches.
Well, I think No Man's Sky is a extreme.
It is probably the most extreme example that I can think of.
But even so, there's day one patches all the time for things.
True.
That change the way games are played, or if someone has like a multiplayer game, say someone has like Call of Duty, and they want to review the online portion before the game's released, the servers will be up, but you'll be playing against other journalists, other people like that, and those aren't always the best. That's not the standard. Like with betas, like that's not what the game actually is like. Even with like Battlefield 1 beta, or like was it that glitchy when it first came out?
Oh yeah.
Your second one,
it was glitchy. I think
was that it does affect the consumers. I think it only affects the consumers if you need the game on day one. Like why on earth would you ever need a game? Do you need a game on day one?
You really don't.
I like to purchase games on day one if I can, especially if it's something like Uncharted I got day one. I might have even pre-ordered it. I don't pre-order that many things.
Right.
Rise of the Tomb Raider I got day one. Some things I do, and those are great, and I have faith in those. And I mean, reviews came out for those early, so I'm like, okay, I know they're good. But if I had to wait like a week to get it, I'd be like, fine. Right. And this doesn't like... So pre-orders, there's so many people... If you talk to any like hardcore gamer that's like they're always like, don't pre-order games. That just makes things like No Man's Sky is another example. Battlefield 4 is an example. Call of Duty, any of these games that you pre-order, they kind of fall on their places. So why pre-order? You don't need to pre-order. There's no scarcity anymore. There's plenty of games.
And they always try and get you with like, you get the special skin or you get this access to this special mission. But 9 times out of 10, probably 10 times out of 10, that stuff becomes available 6 months later.
It's like it's not only that, but it's in the game case, like on a digital download. You go in a week later, you still get the same game case.
Right, and I still have the digital download.
Yeah.
So I feel like I pre-ordered less games this year than I have before, and I'd like to get to the point where I don't pre-order games anymore. I'm just not that strong.
I think there's a little old part of us that's like, I still need to pre-order games. I want to pre-order games. I want to make sure I have this game no matter what.
Right.
I don't necessarily think that's true. I also I don't think this really matters. It doesn't affect the consumer again. Like, so Red Dead Redemption 2. That's been in the works for like 5 years.
Sure.
You're saying you absolutely need that on the day one. You can't wait a week to see what it looks like?
Yeah.
Or even with Rockstar, what if they didn't give out early copies? Would you be like, it's Rockstar, I'm buying this game?
Right. I don't think Rockstar gives out early copies, do they?
Yeah, they do.
Oh.
I assume so.
I thought they didn't, but I could be wrong.
I could be wrong.
A counterpoint to that, not necessarily what I'm thinking, because I'm still like forming what I think on this topic.
I've been thinking about this for a while.
Counterpoint to that, I think there are some games that timing matters. Not all games. I think there are some games, right, where you want to have a healthy pool of players to be playing with. That, and I think like multiplayer games, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I had something in my mind, like The Last of Us multiplayer, right? How many people are playing The Last of Us multiplayer anymore? Probably not that many people.
Probably not that many people that don't already have a lot of experience in it.
Right.
But it's also years after it came out.
Right. True.
So that might not be a good example. I think a better example for you would be Titanfall 2.
Yeah.
So those games were popular in the first couple months, and they fell off pretty quickly.
Yeah.
To where it's hard to find a match, it's hard to do this, it's hard to do that. But I would argue that any multiplayer game worth its salt is going to have people playing a long time. Otherwise, that game's not going to be worth it. It's not going to be worth it in multiplayer if you can't find a match, if you can't find people to play with.
Well, I think what this does is there's most games when they release, the majority of the copies that are sold usually are sold like pretty soon, probably within the first month.
Within the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, first 2 weeks even. I think if this is a trend, not just Bethesda, or maybe this is just what happens with Bethesda games, I think it elongates the amount of time people purchase the good. Maybe to 3 weeks, maybe to 4 weeks, where it's more spread out, because I think there are some consumers out there who consistently are more rational than me, and they don't pre-order games, and they wait for reviews. And what this does for them, because they do follow, maybe they have like a certain personality who they really trust their reviews, whatever, they're waiting on them to hear whether or not this game is worth it or not, right? Like, I'm sure we've got people who are like, oh man, I just waiting to hear how much dollars it's worth, and I'm gonna wait for that price.
Yeah.
I hope so.
We're so influential.
I want to be one day. We will be.
You're a teacher. You're every day.
We will be. So anyways, so I think it could elongate the time period, and I don't know if, I mean, Bethesda might, again, it has so much loyalty and brand strength that it may not affect it at all, right?
Hello Games couldn't do this. The people that made No Man's Sky,
right?
They would not sell anything.
Right. I mean, their whole story is hype train, right? And undelivered promises. So that is like a totally, I think, a different situation. And Hello Games is like unheard of before No Man's Sky. So.
I don't think Bethesda is necessarily waging a war on pre-order games, but I think, why not? Like, you don't need to pre-order a game to get it anymore. And I think of the people this hurts, it would either be one, Bethesda, and two, the game review industry. Because Bethesda then doesn't get all that money right away. Or maybe their thought is, people are still going to buy this day one. People are still going to pre-order this with reviews or without. Maybe they've done the research. They see a positive review doesn't help anybody. A negative review only hurts. So there's only negative that can come from reviews. Or a positive, like if a positive review sells 100,000 more copies, a negative review stops like 300,000 copies from being sold, whereas no review still sells like 50,000 more copies or something like that, or just at the zero.
So you think the effect of negative reviews are outweigh more felt than?
I mean, I don't know personally, but I assume that the people at Bethesda that are smarter than me,
I'm probably thinking that.
Well, like maybe that's it.
Yeah,
but
perhaps
maybe we can continue this conversation. I don't get into all the research I did, so. We haven't talked. This was a couple weeks ago. This was last month when they posted it.
Okay.
And this was before Dishonored 2 came out, and this was before Skyrim Special Edition came out. Okay. Now, I went through and looked through most of the games that came out in November, the games that came out in 2016, and somewhat of the highest rated games I could think of in my head for this generation of consoles on Metacritic, which is an aggregate of all the places.
Sure.
So Doom, which is, I would say, where Bethesda has their basis. They said, you don't get this until the day before. Doom comes out. It was a great game. even though people thought it would be bad because there's no review copies, comes out to an average score of 86. Across all these will be across every console and PC unless it's only exclusive.
Multiple consoles. Okay.
So an 86 is a good game. That's almost a great. I would say a 9 out of 10 or a 90 out of 100 would be a great game.
Right.
So an 86 is good to great.
Yeah.
So Dishonored 2, although only being out for a little bit, is an 89 right now. So that's above the level they want for Doom.
True.
No day one reviews, or only day one reviews. Skyrim Special Edition is an 80. So a solid good game, a little bit lower, but there have been some issues with that, again, with the PS4 mods and things.
Right.
The original Skyrim was a 94 on average, which is a super high score for anything.
Well, during its time, revolutionary.
Yeah. So to compare that to more Bethesda games, Fallout 4, which was reviewed early, weeks, months in advance, whatever, that got an 86. So that's on par with Doom and below Dishonored 2 and above Skyrim. So Doom and Fallout 4 both give the same reviews, but one came out the day before. So they can essentially, Bethesda can work till they can't work till the day because they still have to make it go gold. Once it goes gold, they can't really do much.
Exactly.
And except for the day one patch, which most games have day one patches at this point. I am calling Final Fantasy 15 is going to have a day one patch.
Oh, duh.
Even though one of the reasons they delayed it was to not have one.
Right.
We talked about that.
Now the question is, how big will it be? And how big would it have been?
Another game from them, Wolfenstein: The New Order, came out in 2014. People say it's a great shooter.
Yeah.
And 80, a solid good game. To compare this with other games that came out in 2016, I'm comparing Dishonored 2, again, day one review. Skyrim Special Edition, 1 day review. I'm going to compare that to games in the industry that aren't necessarily the same. Like, there's nothing quite like Skyrim, other than like The Witcher and Fallout. There's nothing quite like Dishonored, except for like Deus Ex and things like that.
Gotcha.
But Battlefield 1, aggregate score of 88, so that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, that's good. Titanfall 2 was an 88. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare just came out. It's 76. Deus Ex Mankind Divided, 83. Madden NFL 17 is an 82. NBA 2K17 is an 89. Bioshock The Collection is an 84. No Man's Sky is a 65. That's way low.
That's the low bar here, guys.
Forza Horizon 3 is an 88. And Sid Meier's Civilization 6 is an 88.
Yeah.
So Dishonored 2 is right on par with that, despite the fact that there was no early reviews.
Right.
Skyrim Special Edition is below some of those, way above No Man's Sky, but I mean, what wouldn't it be? Above Call of Duty, right below Madden right before Madden and Deus Ex, things like that. And then I want to compare that to some of the greatest games on this generation of consoles.
Okay.
So again, Dishonored 2 is at 89, and Skyrim's at an 80. The Last of Us is a 95.
Okay.
And that was on last console, but they did remaster, blah, blah, blah.
Right. I mean, they released it towards the end of the PS3's life, so.
Ratchet and Clank for the PS4 is an 85.
Okay.
Uncharted 4 is a 93. The Witcher 3 is a 92. Overwatch is a 91. The Division is an 80. And Dark Souls 3 is an 88.
Yeah.
So, like, Dishonored 2 would fit right in there.
Right. Well, how much of an effect?
And this isn't sales figures. This is just pure review. Like, I think this game is this game is this good.
I mean, how much of an effect? I mean, did you think there was going to be an effect on reviews based on getting it later as opposed to before?
Well, a lot of people, I think, a main point behind the Cynical Brit and the main point a lot of people have is if they're holding this game until the review date, it's going to be a bad game. It's going to get bad scores. That's all people say. If you even said that in your opening statement.
Did I?
If they are not confident enough in their product to give it out to people early, then how good of a game can it be? Is essentially what I'm paraphrasing what you said.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
But you did say that.
True.
And again, my counter to that is they're so strong, they're so confident, they don't need people to speak for them.
Right.
These scores speak for themselves. And I mean, Skyrim Special Edition is an 80, which probably isn't the best, but it's also a remake of a game.
Right. I mean, that game's been out forever, and the whole PS4 stuff.
PS4 fiasco.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's... I can't think, though... I mean, you would hope that it doesn't matter when it's released for a review. Right? What I'm saying with... It shows they're lacking confidence. I think they're afraid of the negative review on day one and what that effect would have. Not necessarily they're afraid that they're going to get worse reviews because of early release. I just think it shows like they're a little bit more timid, a little more fearful of negative reviews. Not necessarily means that they're bad games. They could end up being really good games. But it just seems like if you're not willing to be put to the test before consumers have access to it, and you're only willing to when they do have access to it, that seems like, number one, you're trying to hide something. That's what it looks like. Not necessarily that they are, but it looks like you're trying to hide something. And I think, too, consumers in a market economy should have as much information as possible when they're making their purchase decisions. Sign of a healthy market. I don't think this is good, and I think it's beneficial to game companies to withhold it until the day of or the day before. It's beneficial to them. I don't think it's beneficial to consumers because they can't make as informed of a decision on day one. Now, how much people does that affect? Well, the people that buy on day one. The rest of the consumers, the people who don't care about buying it on day one, they're not really affected by this because they can get the information. It's just that they're going to get it out later. So really, I just think this is pushing back maybe sales numbers to be stretched out over 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks instead of 2 weeks. And I don't know how much of an effect that's actually going to have because it's Bethesda. Again, as an individual case, Bethesda's seems to be a strong developer. So them doing this compared to Hello Games doing this or somebody else might be a little bit different of a result.
I didn't put Shadow of Mordor on here. I forgot.
I like that game.
I don't know. I still don't think this affects the consumer that bad. Like, people just need to learn, like, you don't need things on day one.
Right, well,
and you get maybe it won't be as a complete review as if they had it weeks in advance, but at the same time, they add patches and they make fixes and things like that. Yeah. And how adequate are game reviews anyway? Colin Moriarty and the Kind of Funny Guys talked about how in IGN, when they reviewed the original Skyrim, Elder Scrolls V Skyrim in 2011, they reviewed it on an Xbox 360, and it played really well on Xbox 360. And then, as I found out recently, the PS3, it crashed a lot. Like, you got the large save file, it couldn't run the game. They didn't play it on the PS3. They played it enough to see if the game was equivalent looking, if it kind of played the same. They didn't play it for hours and hours.
Yeah.
People on PS3 see a review, Skyrim's a 94. That's so awesome. That applies to all systems. I'm going to buy it on the PS3.
Right.
94 doesn't apply. Or maybe it does, and you think, this is a 94? Like, what? I don't agree with that. Whereas, I don't know. I don't know if day one patches are such a big deal to this, but I do think it does affect somewhat to where people are reviewing an incomplete copy of the game.
Right.
And I don't think people say that. Also, a review in progress is never necessarily a bad thing.
Right. And I tend to, I read reviews in progress. I don't like say, oh, it's not done yet, so I'm not reading it. A lot of times I read it just because I like seeing their thoughts through in the middle of the process.
The only thing I don't understand is why there's not an embargo. I think embargoes are fantastic. People break embargoes sometimes, but you don't really. Like, most major companies don't. Why not give people the game 2 weeks in advance and say, you can't talk about this until the day before? I don't understand why that's not there unless it for whatever reason.
The stated reason they said is so that everybody experiences it at the same time.
Which doesn't make any sense.
Which I don't. That excuse, like, to me is like, okay,
like, that's
not a good one. Okay, it's like when your parents tell you something. It's like
when you're older.
They're like, yeah, you can do that when you're older because I said so. Like, no, shut up. No, that's not a good reason.
That's not fair. Life's not fair.
So, I don't like that excuse from them. Just so everybody experience at the same time. Really, everybody needs to experience, like, I don't know, Skyrim at the same time. There's going to be a difference between 2 weeks before and, the day after and a month after. Not with a single player game. It's not going to make a difference.
I still don't think that this directly affects the consumer. I still think you can get all the information you want. I think...
Just not as soon.
Just not as soon, but you wait a day or two.
So it has an effect. It has a small effect. I think it most directly affects game review companies.
Yeah, definitely.
That's who it's... I think it's directed towards them. I don't think it's directed to try and hurt pre-orders because pre-orders are in their self-interest. They want pre-orders, right? Like, any game company wants pre-orders. Like, it's money. It's guaranteed. Like, they want it. So, I think it's directly aimed at game media, video game media.
What if it all was about pre-orders? What if there's just some accountant that's at Bethesda and like, oh my gosh, we have $1 million in pre-orders, and then a bad review comes out. He's like, all these people are restricting their game orders. We just lost $1 million that we thought we had.
Exactly. Maybe that could be it. there's less up in the air. I mean, it's safer to not have it out there.
I think a negative review probably affects a game more than a positive. Like,
probably.
if you, of all these games, a lot of these were 80, 85 and higher.
Right.
You're like, okay, that's a good game, whatever, how am I going to compare that? But No Man's Sky is a 65?
Right.
Like, dang, all these games are 80s and that's a 65? No way I'm picking that up.
Right.
But if I see, like, oh, Titanfall 2 is an 88, well, I don't really want to play it. It might be a good game, but I don't really care. Like, that's a good review. That's a great review. An 88?
Right.
Out of 100?
Yeah, I guess...
Just
people may be looking for negative reviews more than positive ones.
And even,
right?
like...
Because positive ones confirm what you already think. Right? Like, oh, I'm really excited about Battlefield 1. I'm going to look up reviews because I really want to get it. Then you see the review, and it confirms what you thought. However, if you go on there and you see a negative review...
Like, ooh.
That goes against what you were going to do earlier, right? Like, it like hurts the initial excitement that you have for a game when you hear it or see a trailer or something. So I'm sure I agree that negative reviews probably have a bigger effect than positive. Now, I don't know how that stacks up to, like, one game company gives it a bad review and then all the other ones give it a positive one. I don't know what effect one individual media outlet does. But I think negative do hurt more than positive, or help. Hurt more than positives help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One step forward, two steps back.
Yeah.
Is essentially what a positive negative review. I don't know. That's Bethesda's review policy. Some people say that, like, it is hurting the game review companies the most. Mm-hmm. If the game companies can just be like, okay, I'm not going to review your game.
Yeah.
Because reviews help either way. A good review is going to help.
Well, right. It's like the internet's a big place. You got to make as big of a splash as you can.
Yeah.
If you have,
and it's free advertising.
It is free advertising. I mean, it's free exposure. And
maybe I think one of it was like, we're not going to show your ads on our website anymore. That would hurt Bethesda directly.
Right. So, I don't know.
But that's not, as a consumer, like, I still think this doesn't...
I mean, the only way that they could get back to Bethesda is if all the game review companies were like, we are not reviewing this game, we're not advertising any Bethesda game until they change this. That's not going to happen. But they might. Bethesda,
essentially what I'm trying to say with the Metacritic scores and everything, Bethesda has said something and they're sticking to it. Mm-hmm. Doom came out. It was an 86. That's a good game. No review. Dishonored 2 came out. It's an 89 right now on Metacritic. That's a great game. Mm-hmm. No review. Skyrim Special Edition, there's so much talk about it, came out as an 80. And that's on par with Fallout 4, which had so much in front of it. And Wolfenstein, which was an 80, which had so much in front of it. Mm-hmm. Like, their quality isn't changing. They're not hiding their games from anybody. I think it might just be kind of like them. I like to think of it as them puffing out their chest saying, I don't need you to speak for me. My games speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Here it is.
I mean, I think that's one way to look at it. I mean,
that's how I choose. That's the reality I choose.
That's the viewpoint you choose. I still don't like this. This is delaying information to people trying to make a decision to buy a game, and I think people should have as much information as possible. And to change it, to take it away, like, once you have it, to take it away, like, I don't like that. I don't like it. To change your position from, I will give out 2 weeks ahead, I will give Fallout 4 copies early, to, now I'm not going to. I don't know. It's a change of course, and I think it just slows down information to the consumer.
But it's not... They don't have to do that.
I mean, they don't have to. You're right, but
it's their own game.
It just... I know. I mean, they have full rights to do it. They did it, right? I compared to what the industry standard seems to be, have it out there early, let people make the decision.
Sometimes Bethesda makes a standard. They made the standard RPG.
Well, that would
until The Witcher 3.
We haven't talked about that. Will other game companies follow this?
Yeah, I have no idea. It hasn't happened yet, but
we'll see.
It'll be crazy.
Yeah,
crazy. Anyway,
yeah.
Bethesda's review policy.
There it is.
Tell us what you think. A couple weeks after it actually came out, but I just wanted to see how Dishonored 2 did, and it's doing very well.
Yeah.
So there's no review. That's fine. It's still doing well. I mean, it's struggling on PC a little bit, frame rate issues and lighting and things like that. Mm-hmm. But people say it's like super good on console, Xbox One and PS4.
Good.
So good. That's where that is.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
Yeah, let us know what you think, guys. Tweet at us.
At UP Gamers Podcast.
Or comment on SoundCloud.
Right now. Now.
Yep. There we go. Or on YouTube. Which is not timed.
You can put a timestamp.
Can you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
When can
you can. Of course, that's a dumb question. All right.
On to the topic of the day.
Okay.
Games we just can't get into.
Yeah.
So many. I have a list. I actually wrote this down last week because we talked about it. You have a mental list.
I do.
That you're gonna say some things.
I thought we were only
gonna stop
recording,
and you're like, I have so many more to say.
I know that's what's gonna happen. It always happens that way.